Today I got a real treat for you guys. I have today the Blackmagic cinema camera 6K full frame, which from this point on I'm going to call the full frame camera. I'm comparing two different ISOs, ISO 400 and 800, because I have a very interesting thing where I think the native ISO is not necessarily 400 as Blackmagic, but I also have some feelings why I understand why they say it is. And then I'm going to compare the dynamic range. I have a little test where I'm comparing the latitude of the full frame versus the Canon C70. So all of this and more, so continue watching and tune in to find out. What's good, everybody? My name is James Jackson. If you're new here, I do tips, tricks, news, and reviews for the film and video making industry. So if this is content that you like, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell so you can stay up to date on all the content going forth. So today I have a very interesting setup for you guys. You saw my last video, I took the camera out. I took the Blackmagic full frame camera out when I went on a walk. It was a nice fog, nice mist came through, and I thought it would be great to show how it handles like very lifted areas and also seeing how it deals with extreme highlights. So you all will get to see that today. The guys got a little bit of a tease of it in that video. If you haven't checked that video, definitely check it out, link below. As well as I got some test shots with the Canon C70 doing a dynamic range test. But today I'm going to basically go into it. Before we dive in, there's a couple things I want to just sort of highlight so you will go in with an understanding of what you will be seeing. Number one, just remember that when you are shooting at higher ISOs, so going from like say ISO 400 to ISO 800, you are basically raising the noise floor, which is fine as long as the latitude and the dynamic range capabilities goes along with it, which putting more room into the highlights, but eventually that stops and all you're doing is raising noise floors. I bring all this up because you may see some shots of the full frame camera where I'm shooting at 400 versus 800, and 800 just looks brighter. And no, they are exposed the same way. I'm exposing, for the first shot I'm going to show you, I'm exposing the clipping point of the highlight, which will be the sun. And then the second thing I'm going to show you with the human subject is I'm exposing for skin tones, and I'm making sure the skin tones and the exposure I've set it up are exactly the same. But by doing so, you will see that one will be brighter than the other, and that will be 800. And that's because when you raise the ISO, you are lifting the noise floor. By lifting the noise floor, everything just becomes naturally brighter. It's just how digital cameras work. And you'll see it even more so with the Canon C70, and that has more to do with how the behavior of Canon Log 2, which I'll explain later. But let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at this ourselves. So I have right here, I have some shots. Again, these are the shots. And by the way, this is my mom here. She was happy to help me out. So this is a shot of ISO 400, ISO 800, and then I got the Canon C70. And then I got some more at Super 35 because the lens that we were shooting on is the Sigma 18-35 f1.8. For the shots that are open gate, like this is not the vignette. This is ISO, again, we'll talk about it later. But we were shooting at 30 millimeters. So we made sure that, and I'll turn that off so I don't click anything. So it's designed there so we can essentially make sure everything's exposed correctly, and also there's not really vignetting. So that's the thing with the full frame. We're shooting at 30 millimeters, which covers the whole field of view. But I also wanted to show what it would look like on the 18-35, and then these are the raw. Well, where I'm not editing, everything here is through Resolve Color Management, so it's automatic transforming it so you can kind of see. And then these are shots that I did at the walk, where I was showing how it looks like we're rolling off to the highlights. So for ISO 400 and ISO 800. And for these shots, these were shot on the IRIX 45mm T15. and I made the adjustments based on the tilt and mirage variable ND. So the ND was making the adjustments, so everything was, so the fade off was roughly the same. And these are just stills that I will be discussing. They're basically D shots here, just the still versions of those. All right, so let's start off with this. So again, one of the first things you'll notice is that 800 seems to be a bit brighter. But the thing, and the reason why I say 800 may be the native ISO is, let's go ahead and take a look. Let's find a good shot. I want a good shot where I got a good shot at the sun. Actually, that's what the still frames are for, so I don't need to do that. So, but if you'll see here, I freeze framed this so you can see where we can see the roll off of the camera. And as you'll see here, this looks, you can see it clipped here. But then you can see here at 800, there's a whole other stop that we get for the clipping point. Now, highlight recovery is turned off, and yes, you can turn it on, but look at the sun. Look at the sun. So this is what it looks like off, and then you turn it on here. It's taking information that hasn't been clipped. In this case, I believe it's using the green and a little bit of the blue to get it there, because that information. Because the reds were probably clipped at that point. And you could do the same thing here too, where you can throw a little bit more, but look how much nicer that is doing highlight recovery versus here, where it just feels like a splotch. And then look at this, it's just a hard hit versus 800, where it's much more natural and much more natural, much more grainier. And then let's also look at the shadows. So this right here is ISO 400. As you can see, we're still getting a decent amount of details in these dark areas of these trees. Oops, I don't mean to do that. But let's now look at 800 and blow it up. As you can see here, now you can see at the bottom. It's maybe hard to see because this playhead is here, but there's definitely noise. There's more noise in the image, but look how much more detail is seen on the image versus 400. Now you may be wondering, how is that possible? Even though 400 is cleaner, it is technically cleaner, but there's more information in 800 than there is 400. And the reason why this is something you should be aware of is probably because I was shooting in constant quality, not constant bit rate. Constant quality, when you're shooting constant quality, and by the way, I was shooting Q3. So there's Q0, there's Q3, and there's Q5. I was shooting at Q3. With this, whenever you're shooting in constant quality, the moment you start getting to the black point, the camera just throws the information away. It starts throwing away information because it's basically going, oh, this is black. Well, I don't need anything here, so let's toss all this information out. It's very similar to how HEVC, also known as H.265, behaves, where it's black so much cleaner, but it throws away much more information. Whereas 800, because it raises the noise floor and it's noisier, the camera's like, okay, there's still some stuff here. Let's still capture this information. So weirdly enough, because of constant quality, you're able to preserve in certain, and this is an extreme situation. This is not the case for every single one, because you'll see in the shots with my mother, that's not the case. But in an extreme situation where you're dealing with a silhouette or a very backlit situation, it may be better, it's better to shoot at 800 because the noise floor is risen. The camera will not start throwing as much information away like it would at 400, even though 400 is cleaner. But having said all that, let's actually go to the shots of my mom. So here are some shots with my. So this is the Super 35. We're shooting 4.3, even though it's 16:9. We shot in 4.3 because I found 4.3 to be a much better quality if you're going to shoot Super 35 than the 16:9, and you can always make adjustments need be with it. But as you can see here, let's pause here. 800, as again, if you'll notice, especially if I can bring up 400, 400 feels darker. But that again, that's because, again, that's the nature of ISO. You're lifting the noise forward. Because we're bringing the noise forward down, everything in terms of the shadow side is a bit more, there's more shades of gray to play with. But the trade-off is this part right here, which is like the highlights, it clips much faster versus when we look at 400, it's still clipping, but it feels more smoother. It feels more smoother, but you have, of course, more noise. And you can see, I don't know if YouTube compression will throw this out, but the noise is definitely dancing. But if I pause it and freeze frame it, it's really not that bad, quite honestly. It actually looks like grain. And that's one of the things that I like actually shooting at 800. So if we actually take it here and we clean it up, so this is with just and I apply the same thing around, which is, this is noise reduction done. And you can see here, and as you can see here, it's much cleaner, but we still got a relatively smoother roll off into the highlights and to the clipping point versus, and you'll see 400. So let's pull up 400. As you can see, everything is cleaner. But especially when you go outside and you look out here, especially here, the clipping point, it's just a bit harsher versus here. And then if we go to the open gate, we'll see, again, you'll see it's brighter, but that's again to the nature of ISO. But let's look at the ISO 800 here. Again, it's smoother in the highlights versus here. Now, I will say this, because we had to open the aperture up, in this case, we opened the aperture up. The 800 was shot at f2.8, and then 400 was shot at f2. And so the out of focus definitely hides the roll off a little bit better versus 800. But it's still you can still see that there's more details here. The roll off is just harsher on 400. So basically what I'm trying to say here is both ISOs have its value. I understand why Blackmagic says the native ISO is 400. If you are doing more moodier shots, you want to play more in shadows, and ISO 400 is definitely the way to go. However, if you're dealing with backlit shots, you're dealing with silhouette shots, you want to go more, or you want to just get more of a K-pop vibe, sort of feel to it, a very pop feel to your scene, ISO 800 is the way to go. And the highlight roll off, which to me is how, again, for me, it's more about how does the camera roll off? Does it have a very granular, smooth roll off? And in this case, it does. I don't really care about the number. I don't care if it's 13, 14, 15, 16, 20, 12. I don't actually care. What I care is how does the roll off to the clipping point is. What is the noise like? Because if the noise is fine grain, which I've shown you here, it's easy to clean up and get a really solid image. And then trying to create a smooth highlight roll off is it's much harder and requires much more equipment to do properly than it is to clean up noise. And now let's compare this to the C70. So we'll just look at 800. And as you see here again, as we'll look at the Canon C70, it's brighter than the pocket camera. And a lot of this, again, has to do with both the fact that it's at 800, at least compared to 400, but also it's because of Canon Log 2, where Canon Log 2 It's kind of like how raising ISOs is. It's so aggressive, and I've made a video talking about this, but it's so aggressive in terms of reaching into the shadows that it lifts the noise floor so much that it kind of it brightens everything up. Like, look at this compared to the full frame camera, where there's a lot more play in the shadows, and we're shooting at ISO 800, but you can see there's a lot more play in the there's a lot more darks. Like, the darks fall much farther into the shadows versus the C70. The C70 sees, you can see in terms of the separation between, you know, her hair versus this like very dark green shadows, and then you try to come back here, you still see like the separation, but it's much more defined in terms of shadows on the C70. You also probably are noticing that there's a noticeable difference. We did use the same exact lens. So the Sigma 18 and 35 was used on both of these, on both of these guys. This is just sort of the color science of the nature. The C70 has a very clean, very neutral, it definitely gives more of a digital vibe versus the full frame camera, which really goes more into the film, looks more like film than the C70. But you will also, I will say this, in terms of actual dynamic range performance, the C70 still is the superior camera. I mean, you can see it right here. Like, it hits here, it's like it hits a wall, then it drops. But then you see it here. There's so much more information in the C70. And you see that it pushes up and gets more information here. You see it on the curtains, that it's getting more details out here. And by the way, the Canon is slightly open. But it's not that much difference. The Canon is shot at an f2.5, whereas the full frame at 800 is shooting at 2.8. So there again, there's a little bit more, but you see there's still more details coming out of the C70. So the C70 definitely has the dynamic range. But I will say this, in terms of the image, it's definitely clinic. It's definitely, which is why it's so great for documentaries. It's a very neutral look. And again, you got this high amount of dynamic range that you can play with, and you got the DGO with that DGO system, which delivers super clean noise. Whereas, you know, the Blackmagic, the Blackmagic, you're definitely going with more. You definitely have more of a film-oriented look of this camera versus the C70. So, in terms of like total dynamic range, the C70 is still the better camera. However, if I'm going to be honest, no, I really enjoyed the look of the image out of the cinema camera full frame more so than the C70. It has a defining look. I loved how the skin tone is. I love the skin tone on the Blackmagic better. It has more. It feels more rich, and again, that's sort of the consequence. That's sort of the downside of C-Log 2. C-Log 2, again, the benefit of C-Log 2 is the fact that you can like, it doesn't take a lot of light. It looks great with not as much light as you would need for, say, the Blackmagic cameras. It doesn't take a lot of light to get a good image, and it's one of the great things about it. The downside of that is that because it raises the noise floor and pushes the highlights down, it also makes it difficult to, and I'll actually pull this back a little so we can sort of just get a little bit more. So you can see that, yeah, it's still there. But for me, this tends to get a situation where you're going to have to figure out how to really shape the shadows of the C70. Otherwise, you may run into situations where it may feel flat. Whereas the full frame camera, because it just dives, it sort of dives into the blacks at a more rapid pace than the C70. There's actually more dimensions, especially you see in the skin, where there's more play in terms of where you see the shadows and how the skin is, versus here with the C70, where it kind of just, everything just feels a little bit more, it feels a little bit more in the same area. It's sort of in the same space versus, again, the Blackmagic camera, which has a bit more shadow play. But this is it for me, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this information. Let me know what you guys think in the comment series. I would really love to know what you guys think. Let me know. Leave your comments below. And as always, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And until next time, take care, everyone.